everyone. Welcome to the very first video podcast for SSH Writers on Writing. We're not exactly sure whether we're going to keep to this title because not everybody is invested in this yet. So we're going to keep it for today. My name is Enns. I am the SSH Writing Center coordinator at Nazarbayev University. And if there are students out there who want to know a little bit more about how to write in their disciplines, if they want more writing tips, just please go to our website and the URL will be on the show notes. So as we know, writing conventions slightly differ across the disciplines, not always slightly. Sometimes there's huge differences in writing conventions across the disciplines. And a goal of this podcast is to discover, unpack, and demystify those differences, and also to shed light on the great writers that we have at Nazarbayev University. And so speaking of that, our very first guest we're very happy to have is Associate Professor of Political Science Caress Schenk. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her. So her latest book is Why Control Immigration? Strategic Uses of Migration Management in Russia, and it's published by the University of Toronto Press. Her current and previous research has been funded by the American Councils for International Education, Nazarbayev University, and the Fulbright Scholar Program, and has been published in Demokratizatsiya. Did I say that right?
Close.
And Europe-Asia Studies, Nationality Papers, and edited volumes have been published in Edinburgh University Press and the Oxford University Press. I know that she has another very current piece of research. She's looking at the effects of coronavirus in Kazakhstan and Eurasia. So, Professor Schenk, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We're very happy to have you here. So let's just start by asking, how long have you been at Nazarbayev University?
So I have been here from the beginning of the bachelor's program, at least. So this is 9 years now that we've been here in Kazakhstan, and so we've seen all of the students, right, from the beginning of the bachelor's program. And in fact, I just had coffee with one of my former students last night. It's really cool to be here and see students transition from Nazarbayev University into real life and maintain relationships with them. And that is something that being here for a long time has allowed me to do, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. So, and you have your family here too. So they're all settled in.
Yeah, so my husband teaches at an international school locally, and we have 3 kids, 2 of which were born here in Astana. And so we have an 11-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And they're very busy, but they're all happy doing their thing, going to school and keeping their friends. And yeah, they make life exciting.
Probably makes it a little hard to do research every once in a while.
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a little bit about writing in your particular field of political science. And I know that political science is it's not one thing. So when you first began writing in your specific field of PSIR, maybe you can just tell us what that is. And then did it seem intuitive to you, that kind of structure?
There's actually a number of different ways of, kind of political science writing and political science, kind of even just thinking about where we locate ourselves in the discipline. And I'm doing a podcast right now. Can you please ask Dad to help you?
Hello,
sorry.
Hello.
So we're podcast crazy. He was just asking for a podcast. That's what he wanted. So everybody loves podcasts.
Everybody loves podcasts.
It's the way of the future. In fact, I've been podcasting my lectures so that students can listen to them or they can watch them on video, or that they could also listen to them on podcast if they want to listen to, my lecture about electoral systems as they're doing a jog.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool to podcast. So anyways, back to the question. The question was about whether writing for political science was intuitive to me. And I think not really. And in some ways, I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think that's probably because political science is so extremely diverse. So on the one side, you have your super positivist, quantitative types of thinking and types of data collection. and that requires a specific type of writing. And then you kind of have your mainstream political science, which has, again, a certain type of structure, a certain type of argument, a certain type of evidence. And then you also have a more type of exploratory political science, which is much more ethnographic, more like anthropology, much more focused on kind of on the ground research. And that is a much more narrative style of writing. And so when you're trying to write for different audiences in political science, it can be really challenging because it's not always clear what people want from a particular piece of writing. And for students, I think this is also true because each professor is coming from one of those vantage points, and they may have very different expectations for what they want in terms of the types of evidence that you use for backing up your points, the types of writing styles that you use, the types of structures that you use, kind of the key elemental pieces of your writing. So do you need to have a hypothesis in your writing? Do you not need to have a hypothesis in your writing? Do you need to specify what your dependent and independent variables are in your writing? Well, I mean, I never do, because I come from this more kind of narrative style of political science, even though I use those tools to try to help me organize my thinking. And so they're implicit, they're there, they're just not stated. And so I think in some ways I'm still figuring that out after all this time, that that there are these different strategies, and writing for a particular audience can be really challenging, right? So for example, I have an article that I'm trying to get published, and it's a really specific type of argument and a really specific type of writing that I really like, but different journals don't like, right? So I'll send it to one journal and they'll not like it for one reason, and then I'll send it to a different journal and they'll not like it for a completely different reason, right? And so knowing what your audience is, and honestly, I'm not always sure what my audience wants. So I think that's a little bit, that can be tricky, it can be tough. So it's not necessarily intuitive. But, you know, I guess over time you can figure it out. But I think that even if it's not intuitive, even if you give a professor a type of writing that they don't like, or a type of writing that's not their preferred style of writing, that's okay, because they can help guide you to something to understanding what their style is. And I mean, in some ways, yeah, you have to kind of write to different professors' likes, and that's probably not unique for political science.
Oh, okay. So this is good, because I wanted to ask then about when you're looking at your students' papers, whether it's undergraduate or graduate. So is there something frustrating? What kinds of things frustrate you when you're looking at your students' papers?
Right. Yes. Maybe I would just call these even pet peeves, right? Because in some ways these are kind of in the eye of the beholder. But I really hate when students use the word nowadays. I'm not even sure if that's real. I don't know even where that comes from. Like who told them that is actually a good way to write, because I hate it. But I think that's a pet peeve. That's just a matter of opinion, right? That's not a real, it doesn't distinguish the good writers from the bad writers.
Is it the way it sounds nowadays?
I think one of the things that does, but one of the things that I really don't like to see in student writing that really bothers me on a deeper level is when students write, well, this is my opinion, or in my opinion, or I believe, or something like this. Because in political science, we're really trying to get them to make arguments that are logical and well-reasoned, and using evidence to demonstrate that, right? So you may say, I believe that, Donald Trump is a narcissistic, crazy person, right? And I can say that because I'm American and it's my job to criticize my president. That's my political culture. But that is an opinion, right? If you want to make a well-reasoned argument about how maybe even that Donald Trump is mentally unstable, you can say, well, there's evidence that demonstrates that Donald Trump is mentally unstable, and then you give your points, right? Here's an example that demonstrates that. Here's another example that demonstrates that. Here's another example. And that's what political science writing wants. And I think that's not just specific to political science. That is something that many disciplines want. And it's just a clarity of argument and a use of evidence that's logical, and it's not your opinion, because I actually don't care about your opinion. I care about it, right?
Thank you.
But I also don't care about their opinions in the perspective of, from the perspective of writing, because that's not the point, right? You can have your opinions, and we can talk about that, and that's great. But your writing is not really the appropriate place for your opinions, unless you're doing some sort of journalistic, opinions piece or something like that.
Yeah. So I think a number of our students will say that they often write, in my opinion, or I think that perhaps because they don't feel confident enough to say something. If they feel that they don't put that in, they sound like they're more confident than they feel. So would you say that the difference between opinion and argument is evidence, like just a connection to because this, and this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Just explaining yourself. And I think that is something that students have a really hard time doing, is sufficiently explaining themselves, right? So sometimes even at the graduate level, I'll say to students, well, I need you to explain this concept better in your paper, whether it's a master's thesis or whether it's a weekly, one-page paper. And they'll say something like, well, I said that. Well, saying something isn't the same as explaining something, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you have an idea, you really need to, if the key idea of your paper, whether that's, something like democracy, right? Even though people have a sense of what democracy is, you need to define it. You need to kind of conceptualize it. We need to know as readers what you think the term means, so that we're clear about, kind of evaluating all of the steps that go forward.
Yeah. And that takes thinking work. So, and people don't, a lot of people don't actually see that as work, but it really is. It takes a lot of energy for your brain, a lot of cognitive load for you to actually go through those ideas and figure out how they're going to be categorized. And
that's so true.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I know that Agatha Christie, I heard when she wrote, she would take a bath, and so she would eat apples, and so in her bath she would think about how she was going to work out these murder plots. So she was a bathtub writer, and then James Joyce wrote in bed on his stomach, and he used a blue pencil. So these rituals that we follow, when we're doing these given activities. So as a writer, Professor Caress Schenk, when you're approaching stuff, when you're getting down to your papers, when you're writing, do you have any rituals that you use as you write?
No. And in fact, I totally feel oppressed by rituals. Like I'm totally not I'm the least routine person. I get up in the morning and I have my coffee, and, I'll have something to eat for breakfast. But if I have the same thing for breakfast too many days in a row, I feel like I need to burst out of my routine because routines are bad, because I just can't handle it, right? And this is transferred into my work too. So sometimes if somebody tells me like, here's what you need to do to be a healthy person or a good writer or something like this, you need to write this much per day, or you need to do this thing every day. I can't do that. I hate that type of advice, because it just makes me feel defeated before I even begin. Because I've really kind of driven by the passions, right? So I have to feel that, I have to feel kind of inspired in order to do something. That said, because I have 3 kids, I have to kind of discipline in some ways that inspiration and passion to the working hours, right? It's not like I have all sorts of hours to just wait for inspiration to come. So some of the things that I do are I just make myself do it. That's something that I learned as I was doing my master's degree. So, and when I was in my bachelor's degree, I would study and all of these things, but it was often about where are we going to study? Oh, let's go out and study on the quad with a blanket with their friends, and let's go to a coffee shop, and let's do all of these things that actually get in the way of you actually sitting down and studying. Uh-huh. So when I was doing my master's degree, I just realized that I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to have the situation location perfect. I do not have to have a clean apartment. I don't have to have anything except I need to just do this work, right? And so I started then, and have continued to practice this idea of kind of like a core, right? I have a core thing that I need to get done today, and that is going to be the driving focus of the day. And anything else that happens may happen on the periphery, and that's fine. And maybe my kids will get fed, and hopefully somebody else will feed them because that might not happen if I'm in charge. Well, so one of the things that I would say is my ritual, but it's not really very ritualistic, is the place where I get the most ideas and inspirations is when I'm reading. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be reading in my discipline, right? So I read all sorts of stuff, and a lot of it's just really easy and fun stuff because I don't have the mental capacity to read like political science books 24/7. But even if I'm reading like a novel, it tells me something about the human condition, right? And this inspires me, or it makes me think about maybe what I'm writing in a little bit different way. And then I'm always making notes, like whether it's making notes in my calendar or making notes on a piece of paper, or sending emails to myself that then I'll, put in some, it's all very like kind of, it's not super organized. I don't have like a system, right? Because a system is oppressive. I can't deal with that.
Okay, so that's great. I hope you don't mind. We're going to switch tones a little bit because I'm going to ask you,
okay,
because everybody wants to know, what was the most embarrassing moment you had as a student? Did you have an embarrassing moment as a student?
I have embarrassing moments all the time because I am a really awkward person. But I find that as I get older, I just don't care about that. And so I'm...
Okay, so I guess we can just, we should assume that everybody has a dorkiness about them. Nobody is super smooth.
Oh gosh, I hope so.
Well, okay, so yeah, we'll let you go with that one. We'll let it go.
Okay.
So now I'm going to give you a couple of pairs of I'm going to ask you, would you rather do this or that? And you can just tell us. So this is just to see what Professor Caress Schenk prefers, okay? Coffee or tea?
Both.
You're not going to choose? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Cats or dogs?
Cats.
Cats. Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Beatles.
Beatles. Summer or winter?
Winter.
Wow.
Yay,
well,
Austin. That's right.
Museums or libraries?
Oh, museums are awful. I hate museums. Libraries, definitely.
Okay. Cafes or restaurants?
I don't know. Cafes.
Okay. And Paris or Tokyo?
Definitely Tokyo.
Really? Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, Caress Schenk, for being on our show, for giving us some information about how to write in political science and what your life is like a little bit as a writer here at Nazarbayev University. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.